Recording. Are you guys good to go then, Amanda? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining AARP Texas and the Lone Star Legal Aid on this webinar devoted to knowing your rights after a disaster. My name is Jennifer Barrera Wandry. I'm an Associate State Director of Outreach and Advocacy for AARP Houston. AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan social mission organization dedicated to helping people 50 plus live their best life and choose how they live as they age. One way we are doing this is by ensuring you're prepared for the unexpected, like the recent disaster that took place in Texas or in the Pasadena area. Our goal today is to empower you with information so that you are prepared. I'm going to pass it over to the Lone Star Legal Aid team, and they will take it from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation, Know Your Rights After a Disaster. March is Disaster Resilience Awareness Month, so it's the perfect time to do this presentation. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you take this information with you and remember it as you prepare for the next disaster. My name is Amanda Bosley, and I'm the Managing Attorney of the Disaster Relief Unit at Lone Star Legal Aid in our Houston office. And I am joined by my colleague, Chase Porter, who is also an attorney, and he used to be a part of the Disaster Relief Unit with me. And Chase stepped in last minute this morning to do the presentation with me. So thank you to Chase for joining me. I briefly want to tell you about Lone Star Legal Aid. We provide free legal assistance to low-income people living in 76 counties. The information that we are presenting on today is just that information and should not be taken as legal advice. So let's get started with this presentation so you can be disaster ready and know what your rights are following the disaster. I'm going to start with this agenda, or what we'll be talking about today. Blue skies, this is what we're calling the time before a disaster, when we should really be getting our affairs in order and preparing for the next disaster. I will then explain the disaster recovery process, which is probably longer than you think it would be. And Chase will then go over some landlord-tenant stuff and avoiding fraud. I'll go over replacing documents and FEMA basics. Chase will tell you about the insurance basics, and then we'll give you our key takeaways and resources. So moving on to blue skies. Let's talk about real property, personal property, and general preparation. So for real property, this is your house and land. Flood insurance, Chase will discuss in a little more detail, but most people have homeowners insurance, but don't realize that it doesn't cover flood damage caused from a natural disaster. If you're watching this presentation, you should probably have flood insurance because you live in Southeast Texas. Another protection is homeowners insurance, which, like I said, most of you probably already have if you are a homeowner. Clear drainage systems, gutters, French drains at your own property, but you should also walk the streets, and those big gutters that you see in the middle of the street or on the curb, almost always at the corner of the street, those need cleaning too. If there's a lot of dirt and muck piled on the side of the street, that's going to flow in floodwaters and end up in those drains, and it will flood your street and possibly your house. So if you're able to, you should check those out every now and then, especially if there is a storm coming. Secure anything that can fly around or damage your property. Clear title issues if applicable. In order to get certain types of assistance after a flood, including FEMA assistance, you will need to prove you own the home. So it's good to work on getting the home into your name or getting something on file with the property records showing you have an ownership interest in the property prior to the next disaster, so you aren't delayed further after you apply for FEMA or grants from other organizations. For personal property, these are your things, your furniture, your jewelry, your car. Car insurance, Chase will elaborate on car insurance, so I'm going to leave that to him. You should secure any loose property. Make sure your homeowner's insurance covers contents. And then for renter's insurance, if you are a renter, you need to get insurance to cover the contents of your apartment or home that you are renting. And then you will also need to get renter's flood insurance to cover contents that may be damaged in a flood. And finally, during blue skies, you should prepare. make a disaster kit, medication, gas, flashlights, pet supplies, phone chargers, etc. You can also go to ready.gov for more prep info and for a kit list. And plan an escape route, fill your tank and air your tires, gather shelter in place supplies like bread, peanut butter, water, and other non-perishables, and scan and download important documents to the cloud, insurance and title records, and also inventory your belongings. So next up on the next slide, we have the disaster recovery process. The next slide, is it not up? So the disaster recovery process starts immediately after a disaster and continues for years following. Is this slide? I don't see the slide. So our focus is immediately, the slide should be up. If you can't, I'm going to read it to a little bit of it to you. So our focus immediately after the storm is usually issues like landlord-tenant, applying for FEMA assistance because there is a deadline to apply, and getting your insurance claims in as soon as possible because of deadlines. And those will fall into like the 1 to 6 week category. Next, we start focusing on appealing FEMA decisions and denials. And again, there are deadlines related to this. So we also see eviction issues. In this time period, we're starting to see people getting notices to vacate and ultimately being sued to evict because they're unable to pay rent, or they don't think they should have to because the place is damaged. Foreclosure issues because of unpaid mortgages, etc. And those all fall in the 1 to 6 month time period. And some of these issues stem beyond that time period. This is just when we start seeing these issues. And finally, 6 months to years later, we still see people facing foreclosure and the possible need for a bankruptcy filing, landlord-tenant issues, FEMA appeals, insurance problems, and improving home ownership in order to get a repair or rebuild assistance from community block grants. And yes, we're still seeing issues with this after Harvey, which was over 5 years ago. Chase was going to discuss landlord tenant, but I don't see him. So I'm going to try to.
I think he might have fallen off.
Yeah.
Would you like me to share the PowerPoint?
If you're available and can, please.
Yeah, I can share it. Let me open it up here a little bit.
And then let me. Sorry, everybody. We're trying to make it through here. We'll be as soon as she gets this back up, I'll continue. Let me tell you, we were on slide 5.
Slide 5. Go.
All right. Sorry. Thank you for your patience. So for landlord tenant, technically a landlord does not have to reduce rent or release a client from a lease because the contract is still valid. However, if you are current on your rent, you can request repairs from your landlord and send all requests by certified mail with a return receipt card requested. If you're not current on your rent, pay it as soon as possible so you can request repairs. Okay, so for the next slide, this is really important to know if you are a renter. If the property is completely uninhabitable, you can terminate your lease. Since the flood was not your fault, you can request your security deposit back and send the request and lease termination by certified mail with a return receipt requested card. And you may be communicating with your landlord after a flood by phone or email, but make sure you send any lease termination and a request for a security deposit return in writing and have proof that the landlord received it or that it was delivered. So certified mail with a return receipt card is the way to go. If only part of your home is uninhabitable, you can request a rent reduction. Make the request in writing and send it certified mail with a return receipt requested card. If your landlord does not agree, you have the right to file a lawsuit asking to reduce your rent. And make sure your landlord has your current mailing address, because you may not be getting important documents because your landlord is mailing them to an old address. So moving on to evictions, which is, do you want to, oh, I see Chase is back.
Sorry about that, y'all.
Okay. We kept right on going, but do you want to, where you want to join in on and tell us about evictions on the next slide, slide 7? Jennifer was doing the slides, I think.
Sure. Yeah,
If possible, she'll still do that. Yeah.
sure. So, in general, a landlord has to give you 3 days notice to vacate before they go to court and try to have a judge order that you're evicted. And this applies, during disasters and also outside of disasters. But always check your lease. A lease is allowed to change that timeline. I don't see that very often, but make sure that your landlord is respecting that 3 days notice. So if you haven't paid your rent or they're trying to evict you for one reason or another, they have to give you at least 3 days to move out. If you don't move out, if you don't vacate within that time period, the landlord is able to go to the Justice of the Peace Court and file a lawsuit in order to have a judge order that you're evicted. It's very important, of course, that you show up to that court date. If you fail to appear, you will almost certainly get a default eviction judgment against you. The only way you wouldn't would be if the landlord didn't happen to show up either. If you lose at court, if you have a default judgment against you, or a judge otherwise says that you should be evicted, you have 5 days, including the weekend, if you want to file an appeal. If you want to appeal an eviction within that 5 days, you have to do one of two things. You have to file what's known as an affidavit of inability to afford court costs. If you're a legal aid client, you almost always get that granted. That allows you, that's a form that you say, I don't have the money, I don't have the ability to pay the court costs. Or if you don't have that inability, you have to pay an appeal bond. That's an amount set by the judge. They're usually at least like 1 month's rent or more. If you are being evicted because you didn't pay your rent, if you want to appeal, you also have to pay 1 month worth of your rent into the court registry within that 5 day, within 5 days of you filing an appeal. And then as that eviction case goes through the court system, you still have to pay your rent as normal moving forward. If you don't do that, the landlord is allowed to go to court and say they've not paid into the registry, they've not paid their rent, and maybe get an order to remove you and your property from the premises. Go to the next slide. Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about avoiding fraud. So unfortunately, after a disaster, right, a lot of people are trying to take advantage of those who are in vulnerable situations. Your house, your home has gotten damaged. It's a difficult time. And so people, of course, try to come in and take some advantage of that situation. Never agree to pay more than $1,000 or 10% of the total job cost up front. Try to do whatever is lower. If someone is really hassling you to give them a big lump sum up front, I'd be very careful about agreeing to do that. They really shouldn't be asking you to do that. And of course, if you give them money before they've done any work, then that opens up that ability for them to not really do the work. Always inspect and make sure the job has been done before you sign anything saying they've completed the job or making your final payment. Never give anybody access to your bank account in any situation, really. But if they have access to that, then they have very easy access to almost all of your money. And never sign a contract on an electronic device, and that's like an iPad, a tablet, a phone. If they do that, they have your signature and the ability to use that maybe to commit other types of fraud. So try to get a paper contract the old-fashioned way, sign it pen and paper. Do not trust contractors who go door to door following a disaster. A lot of times, they are people looking to talk you into a quick agreement, maybe orally on the front porch, to do a job. A lot of times we see fraud comes out of that. If someone is going door to door, it doesn't mean they're trying to commit fraud. It could be legitimate, but there are some rules around that. They have to advise you orally and in writing that if you agree to do with them to do work, you have the right to cancel within 3 days. And they also have to give you a contract or receipt stating the date that you made a deal, their name and address, that statement of the right to cancel the contract, which includes the address that you need to mail a cancellation notice to. So if you do decide to cancel it, you put it in writing, mail it to that address. A good way to avoid fraud is if you're insured, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, get an estimate from your insurance company, from the insurance adjuster, of the estimate of the damage and the probable repair cost. That'll give you a realistic idea of what it should cost to repair your home. Beware of door-to-door sellers or anyone else that gives you a lowball estimate. If I always encourage people to get more than one estimate to nowadays it's easy to go on Google and get an idea of what it should cost to repair stuff. If something seems like a really, really good deal, it may be a little bit too good to be true. So just be careful about that. Also, if they refuse to leave you a copy of the contract or seem to be playing on the emotions, like I talked about a little bit earlier, those are bad signs. There's no reason why they shouldn't be willing to give you a contract, or leave you something or answer questions and be honest with you. Those are bad signs. If you get FEMA benefits, do not give those to anybody. And most contractors should work with you on getting permits, or at least informing you about that. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to get a permit for any work that needs to be done. So make sure you do, you look around and make sure that your work needs permits before you agree and let someone work on your home. Next slide. And then generally, this is kind of a list of practices from contractors that are kind of red flags. If they offer discounts for referring other people to them, if they're pressuring you and trying to get you to give them an immediate decision. I talked about, if they're asking for large payments up front, that's not a good idea. If they only accept cash, usually not a good sign. If they're suggesting you finance repairs through a lender, the contractor knows. If they aren't willing to give you a copy of a contract, or what they're putting in writing isn't reflecting what you've talked about. Lifetime warranties or guarantees usually aren't really a great thing. That's usually just something they throw out there to make you think you're getting a really good deal. It's unlikely they're going to want to, in 10, 15, however many years down the line, that they're really going to want to try to honor that. Talking about greatly reduced rates. If they don't have a local telephone number, you want them to be local, usually. If they keep saying, oh, there's something we didn't know about, and they want to raise the price, they start doing that over and over, right? They're just trying to get more money out of you. Buying extra materials, and then of course pressuring you to sign things quickly, or scaring you, using scary language, intimidating you, all pretty bad signs. I think we can go to the next slide.
All right. So now let's talk about replacing lost documents. And this can be a pain after a disaster, right? Your home's damaged, you've lost so much, and now you don't even have your driver's license or ID, or your social security card was damaged. Your debit and credit cards were destroyed or lost. And you want to get these replaced immediately, of course. So the next couple of slides give you information on how to replace these. We have phone numbers and websites listed here for each one of these, for driver's license, social security card, food stamps or EBT card, and debit card. And then on the next slide, we have information for lost checks, credit cards, the major ones like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover, and then death, birth, and marriage certificates. So now let's talk about FEMA. And FEMA stands for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And right after a disaster, this is the process of how FEMA comes about. The governor of the state requests a disaster declaration. The president makes a federal disaster declaration. FEMA assistance becomes available and the application process opens up, and you will apply for assistance if you need it. FEMA will send out an inspector to inspect the damaged property. Then you'll have your FEMA decision, your appeal period, and a possible recoupment period. When all is said and done and you've received assistance, FEMA can come back and ask you for proof that you spent the money on what it was intended for, or that you didn't get a duplication of benefits, meaning you got insurance proceeds that covered all of your loss, and then you also got FEMA assistance. So for the application process, apply as soon as you can after a disaster declaration. You can do so online or on the FEMA app on your smartphone, or by calling FEMA. And we have the information for each one: online, mobile, and telephone. And possibly the best way to apply is in person at a disaster recovery center or a DRC. And you get to see a FEMA representative, and also there are other types of assistance at the DRC, and we'll even have a table set up there. And you have a 60-day deadline to apply. So you only have 60 days to apply from the date of the disaster declaration, the one that the president makes. And sometimes this is extended if the disaster is substantial, like we saw after Hurricane Harvey. So on the next slide, FEMA provides assistance for home repair and also for personal property replacement. So real property, this is help with repairs to your home that you own. It will not fix all damage. It will not cover repairs covered by other sources. Like if you have insurance and it covers the entire loss, FEMA isn't also going to give you money. And once FEMA money is received, you must obtain flood insurance. If you receive FEMA assistance at your property, you must maintain flood insurance on that property forever to be eligible for future FEMA assistance. This is subject to statutory caps. The amount changes yearly due to inflation, so there is a cap amount on the amount of FEMA assistance a person can receive. If you are a renter, you may qualify for a rental assistance from FEMA if your apartment is uninhabitable, meaning FEMA will pay you to rent another place or stay in a hotel while your apartment is being repaired. For personal property, you will have to apply with the Small Business Administration before FEMA will be approved for this. It's not just for businesses, it is for people too. The SBA provides low interest loans to people who qualify, and FEMA will not provide assistance for certain things without you first having applied for an SBA loan. In Texas, this type of assistance, personal property assistance, is administered by the state through the Health and Human Services Commission, and it covers items lost or damaged in the flood, including your car. To qualify for assistance for your car repair or replacement, you must carry at least liability insurance. It's not going to replace all of your items. For instance, if you had a luxury rug or a flat screen TV, it's not going to replace those. FEMA only replaces items they consider necessary to live. And this is also subject to statutory caps. It's in the same amount as the home repair assistance, but it is a separate pot of money. So there are two caps that you receive, one for home repair assistance and one for personal property assistance. And then other types of assistance that are possible after a disaster are funeral assistance. FEMA will cover the cost of a funeral if you can prove the death was the result of a disaster. Unemployment, you might qualify if you lived in a disaster area and you lost your job because of it. Also, disaster food stamps may be available after a disaster to people who experienced a loss of income or have other disaster-related expenses and meet certain income limits. Also, you must not have been getting regular SNAP food benefits at the time of the disaster. So anyone who is receiving regular SNAP may be eligible to get food stamp replacement, but that's separate from disaster SNAP. And there's also crisis counseling and then critical needs assistance. This is a one-time assistance provided by FEMA immediately after the disaster in the amount of $500. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the FEMA appeal process before Chase gets to insurance. So for the appeal process, check your application status and review the method of communication you approved and make sure to check that source. So if you applied and said, I want communication to come through my email, then make sure you're checking your email, because they're not going to also send you snail mail. Review your FEMA letter. If you're happy with the decision, there's no need to appeal. If you are denied or you don't think that you received the amount necessary to fix your property, then write an appeal to FEMA or reach out to us to possibly assist with doing an appeal on your behalf. Just remember that the amount provided by FEMA is to make the home habitable, not to make the home the same or better than it was prior to a disaster. And you have 60 days to appeal from the date of the letter to appeal to FEMA. So make sure you get your application in within 60 days from the disaster declaration date, and then also appeal within 60 days of the date of your decision letter. And send in one single appeal for both your real property and your personal property. FEMA will send your personal property appeal to the state. So like I said before, personal property is handled by the state, but FEMA will forward the info to the state to review. What to send in? Document everything: mold, mildew, flood damage, send pictures, submit your own estimates for repairs, your own contractor's bids with estimates and with contact information. FEMA will call the contractor to confirm if they need to. For cars, your mechanic must indicate that the damage was caused by flood water and include the mechanic's contact information, because sometimes FEMA will call the mechanic to confirm information. If FEMA did not pay you for work that you already did, submit receipts. This would be for mold removal and cleanup immediately following the disaster. So FEMA sent me money. You must use the money in the way FEMA told you to use it. You do not get to substitute your judgment for FEMA's judgment. FEMA can request proof of how you use the money. So make sure you're keeping receipts, you're documenting everything that you've done with your FEMA money, because like I mentioned before, there will be a recoupment period and they could pick you, and audit your file. If you don't use the money the way you were supposed to, FEMA can recoup those funds, just like I said. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chase to discuss the wonders of insurance.
Thanks, Amanda.
Sure. That will be the next slide.
All right, so yeah, let me quickly run through insurance. And going back to the beginning of the presentation, the blue skies part, a big part of blue skies is to read all of your insurance policies and make sure that you understand what you have covered by insurance and what you do not have covered by insurance. The worst possible outcome would probably be to have your house or your property, your car damaged by a flood or some other disaster, thinking that it's been covered by insurance the whole time and you'll be able to get insurance money to replace it or repair it, and then it turns out that you don't have coverage. So take the time now to get out those long documents. If you're having trouble falling asleep, read them before bed and make sure that you understand everything that's going on, and seek help and advice if you don't quite understand your insurance policy. There are three big types I'm going to talk about today. One is homeowners insurance, there's flood insurance, and there's car insurance. Homeowners insurance is what a lot of people just call like typical insurance. It's provided through any insurance carrier. There's 100 out there. The Allstate, State Farms, general, all that stuff, right? If they usually have a deductible, which is an amount that you have to pay before the insurance policy kicks in. And there's usually kind of two components of homeowners insurance. One covers your dwelling and the other covers personal property. And you want to read your policy right and make sure that everything is covered. Dwelling coverage helps pay for damage to the structure of your home, roof, walls, the floor, the slab underneath it, that type of stuff. For example, if a roof is damaged because of a storm, they may pay to have someone come out and repair that. Or if hail hits your windows, breaks the glass, or damages the roof, or damages the sidewalk, stuff like that. So, but you have to check and make sure that your policy covers everything at your house. If you have something in the backyard, another structure like a shed, you want to make sure that that's covered, things like that. And then personal property helps pay for damage to your belongings if they're damaged by a covered risk. So for example, if a pipe bursts in your house, like we saw, during the winter storm a couple years ago, and damages your furniture, your clothes, it may help pay for that. But you have to make sure that everything is in your policy. Specifically, you want to make sure that all your furniture, your clothes, whatever type of personal property it is, that you've identified it, and your insurance company has said we're going to cover damage to that particular item. Homeowners insurance kind of implies that you own your house, but if you are a renter, you can get something very similar called renter's insurance, that will help cover the contents of your apartment. We talked earlier about damage to the structure, stuff like that is usually should be covered by the landlord, but it's important to have renter's insurance as well. Flood insurance is another type of insurance that everyone in this part of Texas, this part of the country, probably should think about getting. Flood damage, importantly, is not covered by your standard homeowners insurance, no matter kind of what causes the flooding. So saturated ground, overflowing of rivers, lakes, creeks, water from the ocean, storm surge, lots of reasons why your house may flood. It's usually not going to be covered by homeowners insurance, and like unless it's a burst pipe like we talked about a minute ago. But I just can't say it enough. This is, if a hurricane comes through and floods the neighborhood, your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover damage because of those flood waters. This can only be purchased through a program called the National Flood Insurance Program. This is a federal program governed by federal law, that was created a few decades ago. And it's the only way to get it. There are approved flood insurance companies that you have to go through and purchase flood insurance. If you live in a flood zone and have already received FEMA assistance, or in the future you receive FEMA assistance, moving forward, federal law says that you have to get flood insurance. If you don't, then not only are you not going to have the benefits of flood insurance, but you're not going to be eligible to get more help from FEMA or other government disaster relief programs. And then the link to the FEMA website that has a lot of good information about flood insurance is there at the bottom. And then lastly, I want to talk about car insurance. In Texas, like, I only have the bare minimum requirement on my pickup truck. That's only liability insurance. So if I go out and hit somebody, it protects them from me being a stupid driver or whatever happened. Liability insurance is not going to help you fix your own car, especially after a flood. So if you want to make sure that your car is protected, and unlike me, I should probably go get this, but you should get comprehensive insurance in order to make sure that your car is going to be protected after a flood. And then oftentimes, in order to get a rental car, they may want to see that you have car insurance as well. If your car took on water, it's likely that they're going to try to total it out and just give you a payment on what they thought it was worth at the time. So again, just to wrap up that side, and then we can go to the next one. Read your insurance policies, make sure you understand exactly what they cover and exactly what they don't cover. Then we can go to the next slide. This is just kind of the insurance process generally. So if you think you've had damage due to a flood or something else that insurance covers, you want to file a claim with your insurance company as soon as you can. Your policy will tell you how long you have, but typically they require notice as soon as possible. Excuse me. So you want to make sure that you get on the phone or go to their website as soon as you can and get that claim going. If you have a claim that you think is flood related, go to that website, that FEMA website. It can help you file a flood insurance claim, but you should also file something with your regular insurance company just to make sure that they have it there. And if there are things that flood insurance doesn't think it needs to cover, maybe your regular insurance company will end up covering something, because, you know, flooding happens, but you may have other damage, of course, from wind or hail or whatever it is. So get all that information out there as soon as possible. Keep a copy of everything you give to your insurance adjuster for your own records. And so you know what you've given them and have a record of that if there are problems in the future. Most insurance policies and companies are going to expect you to mitigate your damages, and it's just a good idea. This is things like turning off the water to a specific faucet if you know it's broken, or if you have a burst pipe, go turn the water main off. If there's a problem with your roof or something, putting up that, you know, the famous blue tarp, these kind of things that they expect you to kind of use some common sense in order to stop whatever's going on and limit the damage. Take pictures, take more pictures, and take some more pictures. Easy to take videos too. Just walk around and take a video of everything. Save them on your phone, save them out somewhere else too that's nice and safe, so you have as much of a record as possible, because you have to prove your damages. If it's due to flooding, you're going to have proof, right, of how high the water line was, so you want to make sure you take pictures of that. And if you go out and purchase anything to help mitigate damages or just to get you into a little bit more of a comfortable living situation, keep receipts of those items, turn them into insurance. They may help you get reimbursed for that potentially. If areas have mold due to, you know, the flood waters have receded, the rain stopped, and mold starts to grow, mold is of course hazardous to your health. So make sure that you go clean them. Don't wait for insurance or someone else to pay for that to get cleaned up or whatever it is. And we have a link here to a brochure that teaches you how to do that safely. Don't throw anything away. If you have personal property or something that has been damaged, keep it as evidence of that damage. Don't keep it inside your house if you think it's posing a risk to your health. Put it outside, but just make sure it's available in case the insurance inspector wants to take a look at it. If your car is damaged due to flooding or anything else, don't clean it, don't use it. Not only do you want the inspector to be able to see the grime line, you know, how high the flood water got up, how it damaged the car, so that they have an accurate picture of how high the water got. You also need to keep in mind that if your car engine is really wet, if it got saturated, it got flooded, if you turn it on and try to use it, you may damage your car more. Insurance may not want to cover any damage that comes of that. And also it's just usually not necessary to kind of run that risk. And we can go to the next slide to talk a little bit more about flood insurance. So same thing with flood insurance, report your loss immediately to your insurance agent or carrier. Sometimes they can give you advance payments to help cover the damage, help you start to repair stuff. So ask them if they can do advance payments. You generally have 60 days to file your proof of loss. There's a form on that website there that you use to do that. FEMA can extend the deadline, and they usually do for major disasters, and can do for smaller disasters, but still try to do it as quickly as possible. If part or all of your claim has been denied, talk to your insurance adjuster or the insurance company to request an additional payment. That's where photos, all that stuff we talked about of having the evidence can come in handy to say, hey, you didn't pay me enough for what it's going to cost to repair my home, replace my property, whatever it is. You can always go out and get your own adjuster, or you can request a additional adjuster to come out and look at your house, to give another idea of what it costs to get it repaired, and then submit that additional evidence to the insurance company. But you got to get all that done by that deadline in order to prove the loss. You may file your flood insurance appeal directly to FEMA if you don't think you've been paid the money that you should be paid to cover the damage. On appeal, FEMA will work with you and your insurer to gather the claim facts, review your policy, and come to a decision on your appeal. You can do this for free. There's no fee to file an appeal, and you don't need a third party to represent you. You can do this on your own. But just remember that there's another 60-day deadline. So if you get an insurance denial letter, or the payment isn't as much as you think you deserve, you only have those 2 months, those 60 days to file the appeal. You can seek an appraisal for disputes over the amount of loss due to flood damaged property. However, if you complete an appraisal, you cannot file an appeal with FEMA. So you have to kind of pick one route, at least at first. And then if you go through the appeals process, or get your property appraised, you have up to 1 year to file a lawsuit if you need to, in order to get what you think you deserve. We can go to the next slide. And then this is a 5-step how to file a flood insurance claim. I won't run through all of it in detail, but you promptly report your loss to the insurance company, documentation, all the photos and videos we talked about, begin your cleanup, do stuff to mitigate the damage, and also to start kind of cleaning up, making sure there aren't health hazards remaining. You're going to meet with your adjuster. They're going to come out and take a look at all the evidence you've gathered, take a look at the property themselves, and they should be helpful and willing to kind of provide guidance and walk you through the process. And then hopefully you'll receive a payment for some amount, and you take that money to go out and get the repairs done. And then again, if you don't receive a payment, or you think that you didn't receive the payment you deserve, then you can go through the appeals process, or ultimately file a lawsuit if needed. Next slide, please. Okay. And just one last word on homeowners insurance. As I've said over and over, read your policy. Make sure you know what it covers, what it doesn't cover. If it doesn't cover everything you think it needs to cover, get on the phone as soon as possible during blue skies. Talk to your insurance company, your representative, and see if you can get the policy adjusted so that you're going to have all the coverage you need when that storm inevitably comes. Most insurance companies allow you to ask for a second inspection. So you come out and have your house inspected. You can always get a second opinion. You can go out and hire an independent insurance adjuster to come and evaluate your property. If that independent review assesses that there's more damage, then you of course should send it to your insurance company as part of your appeal. You typically would do that if you think that you're entitled to more money than the insurance company has said they're going to give you. Homeowners insurance, unlike flood insurance, is regulated at the state level. In Texas, that's the Texas Department of Insurance. If you have any complaints against your insurance company, or you're struggling to resolve an issue with them, you can go to this website and file a complaint, and the TDI will look into it and may help you resolve the complaint. If your homeowner's insurance covers windstorm damage, there is a state ombudsman that is there to help you resolve any disputes, misunderstandings, denial of coverage. You can get coverage. The ombudsman will help you out. To be eligible for that, there are a number of requirements that the Texas legislature has passed. These include you have to be in certain locations. You have to show that there was a denial of coverage from at least one authorized insurance company. And there are certain building codes and things that your home will have to have met in order for them to come in and help you get coverage for damage due to wind. And I think with that, I will pass it back to Amanda to wrap up our presentation.
Thank you, Chase. Yeah, on the next slide, we have our key takeaways. So if you got lost during any of all of the presentation, this slide is the one you want to pay attention to. If you don't have insurance yet, consider purchasing it. Regular insurance will not cover floods. Renters need to get specific renters insurance. Make sure you file your insurance claim immediately. Take lots of pictures of everything. I'm pretty sure we've driven that one into the ground. Gather evidence of your damages to submit to your insurance inspector. Make your house and apartment as safe as you can. And then we have this pro tip here. If your power goes out, unplug everything. Turn off your HVAC system. If those things are plugged in, when the power comes back on, they may short out, and your insurance company is not going to pay for these if the reason that they don't work is because of a power surge. And then finally, be aware of bad contractors. On the next slide, we have a few resources for you. The Legal Aid Disaster Resource Center. This is a great website with valuable information regarding all disasters. It will have the date of the FEMA appeal deadline, links on how to apply for unemployment and DSNAP and the deadlines. And it just has a lot of resources regarding disasters. And the next website is the National Disaster Legal Aid Resource Center. It's similar to the website above it. It will have the same deadlines and links. It also has a FEMA appeals generator, so you can write your own FEMA appeal if needed. And it's on the main page, create a FEMA appeal letter. It also has a disaster preparedness link at the top that has a lot of information on disaster prep. And there is a link to FloodSmart. This has information on the National Flood Insurance Program. And then the Office of Flood Insurance Advocate, they advocate for the fair treatment of policyholders and property owners, and has some good links regarding flood insurance. And then the very last slide is our information on how to apply for our services, either online at our website, lonestarlegal.org, or by phone, 800-733-8394. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for joining us. If anybody has questions, we're happy to answer them. I know that was a lot of information. There are a few people here. If you have anything thoughts you want to share, you can please do so now. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Loretta. Yeah,